Nobody from my family showed up to my graduation, not my wife, not my kids, not even a single seat with my name on it. They were all at my brother's barbecue party laughing around a pool while I walked across a stage I fought 5 years to reach. And the moment I stepped off my phone buzzed with a message that froze my blood. We need to talk, urgently. Then I saw it 45 missed calls from my wife. 45. If you've ever felt the moment your greatest victory twisted into your worst fear, you'll understand exactly where I was standing. My name is Kai Mercer, and this is the hardest story I've ever told. Before I share it with you, I want to know you're here with me. Just drop a hi, or tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far my story reaches. Sometimes knowing someone is listening makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if my story resonates with you even a little, consider subscribing. It helps more than you think, and it reminds me I'm not sharing these moments alone. I walked off that stage with my diploma in my hand and a hollow pit in my chest because every seat reserved for my family, my wife, my kids, my parents sat empty under the bright auditorium lights. People around me were crying, hugging passing flowers down long rows of proud relatives. I just stood there alone, trying to swallow the sting while pretending it didn't matter. 5 years of late-night classes, early morning shifts, and weekends sacrificed had brought me to this moment. And somehow, I was the only one who showed up for it. I'm Kai Mercer, 30 years old, living in Denver, Colorado. For half a decade, I'd been splitting myself into pieces, 10 hours a day at Evergreen Capital, 3 hours of night classes at the University of Colorado, Denver, and whatever scraps of time remained for my wife, Sienna, and our 2 kids. Jackson, 8, loud, competitive, always trying to one-up his cousins. Luna, 6, soft-spoken and glued to my side whenever I managed to make it home before her bedtime. I loved them more than anything, but over the years a strange distance had built between us, like they were drifting on a current I kept trying and failing to swim against. My parents, Mark and Evelyn, lived down in Santa Fe. They were the kind of parents who cheered loudest for my older brother Rowan, and somehow never noticed when I needed them. Rowan had been the golden child since birth. He scored touchdowns. They traveled across states to watch. I won academic awards. They mailed me a congratulatory card. As adults, nothing changed. Rowan bought a new house. They spent 2 weeks helping him renovate. I asked if they could babysit during my final exams. They said they were exhausted from driving and promised to help next time. There never was a next time. Maybe that was why I chased the MBA so hard, to finally prove to myself that I wasn't just Rowan's quiet shadow. Becoming senior portfolio manager meant stability, a future, a chance for my family to breathe easier. I thought finishing this degree would finally mean being seen, not only by my firm, but by the people I loved most. But when I stepped down from the stage, the first thing my phone lit up with wasn't a congratulations or a photo of my kids holding a sign saying, "Go Dad." It was a message from Sienna. We need to talk, urgently. And beneath that 45 missed calls, I stood under the shadow of the university building, the noise of celebration fading behind me, realizing this day wasn't an ending or a beginning, it was a warning. Something was already unraveling, and whatever it was had been happening long before I crossed that stage. I stared at my phone as the campus lights buzzed above me, and for the first time all day, I felt the truth settling in. The empty seats weren't an accident. They were the first crack in a much deeper fault line I was only now beginning to see. The moment I saw those empty seats, my mind snapped back through 5 grinding years of a double life. Every morning I dragged myself out of bed at 5 packed lunches, handled quick emails, drove to Evergreen Capital for a 10-hour shift, then raced across Denver to make it to class by 6. I'd sit under fluorescent lights until 9 at night, take notes until my hand cramped, then go home to a sink full of dishes and 2 kids already asleep. Jackson would complain in the mornings that I never came to his games. Luna would fall asleep with a book on her chest because I wasn't home to read it to her. I told myself it was temporary, that one day they'd understand why I missed so much. Sienna understood at first. She was proud, really proud. But as semesters piled up and I spent more nights hunched over textbooks than beside her, she changed. She started working more weekend shifts. She stopped waiting up for me. Conversations became shorter, colder, and eventually stopped being conversations at all. She never yelled. She didn't have to. Silence can build a wall thicker than any argument. My parents didn't help. Anytime I asked for support, they were busy helping Rowan. If he sneezed, they brought soup and blankets. If I called, they said they'd get back to me and never did. When I asked them to watch the kids so I could attend a mandatory study session before finals, they said they had to drive down to help Rowan assemble an outdoor grill. A grill. While I begged for help balancing the weight of my life. Then 2 weeks before graduation, the first crack ripped wide open. Rowan sent a group message announcing he was hosting a massive barbecue in Colorado Springs on the exact same day as my graduation. He didn't ask. He didn't check. He just declared it like everyone should naturally show up. My parents responded instantly. "We'll be there. Rowan, can't wait." My kids saw the message and immediately started talking about swimming pools and water slides. Sienna didn't say a word, but the look in her eyes told me she was already picturing herself there too. I called Rowan, trying to keep my voice steady. He brushed me off like my graduation was some errand I'd invented. "It's just a ceremony, Kai. You're 30. You already had one after college. This barbecue is for the whole family. Don't make it weird." Hearing that hit harder than I expected. Not because he dismissed the degree, but because I could tell deep down he truly believed I should rearrange my life around his. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat at the dining table staring at the graduation tickets I'd ordered months ago. 6 tickets each with a printed name. I'd imagined handing them out proudly. Imagined Sienna smiling. Imagined my parents telling me they were proud. Now they stared back at me like evidence in a case I didn't want to solve. I went to bed with a knot in my stomach, a quiet, heavy certainty forming in my chest. My family wasn't choosing between my graduation and the barbecue. They had already chosen, and it wasn't me. That was the night the first real fracture appeared, anger, disappointment, and something colder underneath the sense that I was losing my family before I even realized they were slipping away. 2 weeks before graduation, I threw myself into preparations the way someone does when they're trying to hold their life together through sheer will. I reserved a table at Highlands Prime, the nicest place I could afford. I bought a new navy suit, scheduled a haircut, printed the tickets, and even emailed reminders to everyone: Sienna, my parents, Rowan, my sister-in-law, choosing optimism over history. They had promised they would be there. I believed them because I needed to believe them. But as the date crept closer, something about Sienna started to shift. Every time I mentioned the ceremony, she deflected. She'd check her work schedule, scroll through her phone, or change the subject entirely. When I asked whether she'd picked out clothes for the kids, she mumbled something about still thinking. It wasn't anger, just distance. A space between us she no longer tried to hide. I asked myself if I was imagining it, but the knot in my stomach said otherwise. Then my mom called one afternoon, her voice too casual, the way people sound when they assume you already know something. "Sienna mentioned the kids will ride with us to Colorado Springs, right? We're leaving early so Rowan can get help setting up." I froze. The phone slipped in my hand. I hadn't heard a word about this. My own mother knew my children's plans before I did. And in that second, something clicked into place. Sienna and Rowan had already discussed the BBQ, had already made arrangements, had already chosen. I wasn't part of the conversation. I wasn't even part of the equation. That night when Jackson and Luna were in their rooms, I asked Sienna directly. No preface, no softening. She hesitated before admitting the truth: the kids wanted to go to the barbecue. They'd been talking about the pool and the water slide for weeks. And she thought it would be too much to make them sit through a 3-hour ceremony. "It'll overwhelm them," she said, like she was doing them a favor. A different version of me might have stayed calm. But the words punched something open in me I'd been holding shut for too long. I told her this wasn't about a ceremony. It was about me finally reaching something I had fought for every single day. She said I was being selfish, that I cared more about being applauded than about our children's happiness. Somehow I ended up defending myself in my own house, explaining why my one moment of pride should matter too. Jackson overheard and came downstairs. "Dad, the BBQ will be way more fun. Why can't we go?" Luna cried because she thought I was trying to keep her from seeing her cousins. They weren't being cruel, they were being children, but the pain was no less sharp. I realized then that somewhere along the way I had lost any influence over my own family. Whatever I had tried to build over 5 years of sacrifice had slipped through my fingers. That night, I lay awake staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house. The same house I worked to pay for. The same house I barely slept in because of late-night classes. I wondered if maybe I had given so much to my future that I had accidentally emptied my present. Or maybe they simply hadn't noticed how much I was trying. Either way, I went to sleep knowing something fundamental had shifted, and it wasn't shifting back. The morning of my graduation felt nothing like the day I'd imagined. Instead of excitement, the house carried a cold, hurried tension. I woke early, dressed in my suit, and tried to steady myself. But in the kitchen, Sienna was packing sunscreen and towels, tossing snacks into a cooler while barely glancing in my direction. Jackson zipped up a bag stuffed with swim trunks. Luna was already in her glittery flip-flops. No one asked what time my ceremony started. No one asked if I was nervous or excited. It was like my big day didn't exist at all. Then my phone buzzed a message from Rowan. "We're close. Be ready." It wasn't for me, it was for them. A moment later, Sienna said she'd try to meet me at the ceremony afterward if things went smoothly. I heard something inside myself go quiet. A silence I couldn't fill, a space I couldn't cross. I kissed the kids' heads, but they were already reaching for the door. "Sienna," I said, blocking her path for a second. "Are you still coming? Are you keeping your promise?" She sighed as if I was asking too much. She said I should understand that children need joy, not long speeches. She said a father should know that. And in that brief exchange, I realized I would be walking into that auditorium alone. When they left, I noticed a piece of paper on the counter, Sienna's handwriting. Took the kids early to help Rowan set up. "Good luck. We'll try to be there. No apology, no congratulations, not even my name. Just a note you'd leave for a delivery driver." I drove to campus alone, watching families pile into SUVs with balloons and flowers, while I stared at the empty passenger seat beside me. The city felt surreal, like I had stepped outside my own life and was watching someone else's unfold. The closer I got to the university, the more I questioned whether I had misjudged everything: my marriage, my relationships, my role as a father. Or maybe I had simply been pretending things were better than they were. In the parking lot, I checked my phone out of habit and saw a photo Sienna had posted minutes earlier. She, my parents, and Rowan stood in front of his grill, smiling under a string of backyard lights. Jackson and Luna were already in the pool behind them. The timestamp lined up perfectly with the moment they pulled out of our driveway. They hadn't just chosen the BBQ. They had never intended to come at all. My hands shook around my phone. Not with rage, not even with sadness. With something deeper, heavier, the realization that maybe I'd been alone long before today. I walked into the auditorium and watched families pack into every row, parents waving at their kids on stage, partners recording everything, children cheering. My section had 6 empty chairs, 6 reminders that I had failed to make myself matter to the people who should have cared most. I took my seat with a numbness I couldn't shake, knowing that after this ceremony ended, the real confrontation, whatever form it would take, was waiting for me. The noise inside the auditorium felt like a living thing. Shouts, laughter, families calling out to graduates as if they were sending them into a new life with a burst of joy. Everywhere I turned, someone was posing for a picture or being wrapped in a proud embrace. Bouquets rustled, cameras clicked, people cried in each other's arms. And there I was, standing in the middle of it all with my hands in my pockets, surrounded by empty space where my family should have been. Every cheer around me made the silence beside me louder. I told myself to hold it together, to just get through the ceremony and deal with the rest later. But when I heard someone call my name, it startled me hard enough that I flinched. I looked up and saw Cassidy Hale, my closest coworker, the one person who had seen me dragging myself through work these past 5 years, jogging toward me with a smile. She wasn't dressed for a graduation. She'd clearly left work early. "Kai," she said breathlessly, "I wasn't about to let you stand here alone today." That one sentence hit me harder than anything my own family had done. They hadn't shown up. She had. When they began calling names, my chest tightened. I listened to applause after applause, each one punctuated by loving cheers from the audience. When my section rose, it felt like I was stepping into a spotlight I didn't deserve because the people I wanted to share it with weren't there to see it. Kai Mercer, the announcer said. I walked across the stage under the bright lights, the applause sounding hollow in my ears. I looked toward the row reserved for my family, 6 seats perfectly aligned. Still empty. Nothing but blank space where their faces should have been. As I took my seat again, I felt my phone buzz inside my jacket. I ignored it at first, trying to focus, but it wouldn't stop. After a few vibrations, I finally pulled it out and saw a single message from Sienna waiting on my lock screen. We need to talk. Urgently. My stomach tightened. Something inside me whispered that this wasn't just an apology for missing the ceremony. Something was wrong. Then the dean stepped up to announce the academic honors. My name came up as one of the top MBA graduates of the year. The hall erupted in applause. People clapped, families stood, classmates congratulated one another. I sat completely still. I kept imagining my kids hearing my name. I kept imagining Sienna smiling for the camera. I kept imagining my parents looking proud for once, but none of them were there to witness any of it. When the final applause faded, I took my phone off silent. The screen exploded with notifications. 45 missed calls from Sienna. 45. My throat closed up. She wasn't someone who panicked easily. She didn't call repeatedly unless something was seriously wrong. I didn't even say goodbye to Cassidy. I just stood and rushed down the aisle, nearly stumbling in my haste. In the quiet hallway, the contrast was jarring, the noise of celebration fading behind me, the sterile echo of my footsteps stretching ahead. It felt like I was walking between 2 versions of my life, the one I had fought for and the one I was losing. My hands shook when I called Sienna back. She answered on the first ring, her voice breaking before she even said my name. Kai, oh my God, Jackson had an accident. We're at Memorial Hospital. We didn't know how to reach you. Please just come. The hall spun for a moment. My son was hurt, and suddenly nothing else mattered. I ran for the parking lot with only one thought in my head: get to him. The drive from Denver to Colorado Springs felt endless, even though I was speeding down the interstate faster than I should have. Every mile stretched tight between fear and anger. Fear because my son was hurt. Anger because he shouldn't have been at that barbecue in the first place. Every time I gripped the wheel tighter, I imagined how that day could have been different if they'd come to my ceremony. If Rowan hadn't planned his party. If Sienna had told me the truth, instead of making decisions behind my back. Halfway there, my phone buzzed with a long text from Sienna. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. She admitted she had let the kids choose the BBQ weeks ago. She admitted she'd promised Rowan they'd come. She admitted she hid it from me because she didn't want another fight. I felt something inside me crumble, not just trust, but the last piece of belief that she saw what mattered to me. When I walked through the sliding doors of the emergency room, I saw them immediately. My parents, Rowan, Sienna, Luna, all huddled around Jackson's bed like a picture-perfect family portrait taken at the wrong moment. Their faces were twisted with worry and fear. They touched his arm, wiped his tears, whispered comfort. They were all there for him, just not for me. I stepped closer, and even before I spoke, Eloise, my younger cousin, looked up at me with an awkward half-smile that said she already knew. She'd never been good at keeping things to herself. Rowan told everyone earlier, she said nervously, that Sienna already agreed to bring the kids. He said your graduation was just, not a big deal. She trailed off when she saw my face. Something cold spread across my chest. Of course, Rowan had framed it that way. Of course, everyone assumed I'd be fine with it. When Jackson finally noticed me, his swollen eyes widened. "Dad," he cried, "why didn't you come to the BBQ? Everyone was there." His voice broke, and that nearly shattered me. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He genuinely couldn't understand why his dad hadn't shown up to something he thought was important. He didn't understand that he had missed the biggest moment of my life. The room fell into a strained silence as I stepped beside him. I asked what happened though, my voice shook. Rowan explained quickly, saying Jackson had been showing off on the water slide and slipped. He talked like it was some unfortunate accident no one could have prevented. My parents chimed in, talking over each other like they were rushing to justify themselves. Something in me snapped. I told them I had stood alone at my own graduation. I told them that not one of them, not my wife, not my kids, not my parents, had shown up. I told them I walked across that stage and saw nothing but empty chairs. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through the room. Everyone went quiet. Then my father said the one thing that pushed me past my limit. "You should have reminded us," he said. "You know how busy we are. We can't keep track of every little event." Every little event. The ceremony I worked 5 years for. The event I emailed them about. The event I reminded them of in person. The event I built my entire life around. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stepped back, suddenly exhausted to the bone. I told Sienna I needed air, and before anyone could say anything else, I walked out of the hospital. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I was walking away from an argument or walking away from a version of my family I couldn't carry anymore. Outside, the night air hit me hard, and I finally understood that the real confrontation wasn't happening in that hospital room. It was coming next, and nothing about my life would be the same afterward. I drove back to Denver that night with the road stretching endlessly in front of me, the dashboard lights blurring each time my eyes stung. The interstate was nearly empty, but my head felt crowded with everything I'd tried to ignore for years. I kept seeing Jackson crying in that hospital bed, kept seeing those empty seats in the auditorium, kept hearing my father's voice telling me my graduation was just another event. By the time I crossed into the city limits, I felt hollow, as if the day had managed to steal both my moment and the last remaining piece of respect I thought my family still held for me. My phone buzzed every few minutes. Sienna called again and again, her name lighting up the screen like a plea I wasn't ready to hear. I didn't block her, but I didn't answer either. I needed silence, not explanations said too quickly, not apologies thrown out because she felt guilty. I needed space to feel everything without someone else telling me how to feel. Then came a long audio message. I didn't plan to open it, but my thumb moved on its own. Sienna's voice filled the car, tired, choked, raw. She said she'd felt like a single mother for years, like she'd been carrying the load alone while I chased something bigger. She said she was worn out from always making room for me to climb, that she had stopped feeling seen or heard long before the ceremony. But she also admitted something else she'd pushed for the BBQ because she wanted to be somewhere she didn't feel overshadowed by my achievement. The words hit harder than I expected. Part of me understood her exhaustion. Another part of me saw the truth clearly. She hadn't missed the ceremony because of the kids. She'd missed it because of resentment she never voiced. When I finally stepped into the house, the silence felt unrecognizable. Toys were scattered on the rug, the remote on the couch, a half-opened puzzle on the dining table, but no laughter, no footsteps, no voices calling my name. They were all still in Colorado Springs, and for the first time, the house felt like someone else's home, not mine. I realized then that my family had been drifting away from me long before this day. I had just been too focused on pushing forward to notice. On the kitchen table, I saw something that made my throat tighten. A small piece of paper folded unevenly. Luna's handwriting. I recognized the backward letters instantly. "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't see you. I thought you didn't need me." It wasn't the spelling mistakes or the shaky lines. It was the message. My daughter believed I didn't need her. That told me everything I needed to know about what she'd been learning from the world around her. I grabbed a duffel bag, threw in clothes, and headed out again. I wasn't running. I just knew I couldn't think clearly inside a home full of wounds that were still bleeding. So I checked into the hotel I'd originally booked for my parents, the one they hadn't bothered to use. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just when I was locking the door behind me, my phone rang again, this time from my boss. His voice was bright, warm, full of pride. He congratulated me on my MBA. He told me I'd officially earned the promotion to senior portfolio manager, and that the board had been impressed with my capstone project. His words should have lifted me. Instead, they tangled with everything else inside me until I couldn't tell what I felt anymore. Proud, furious, relieved. devastated. I stood there for a long moment after the call ended, looking out the window at the quiet Denver skyline. I had fought so hard for this life, and now everything in it felt unsteady. One thing was certain when I returned home: nothing about my family would function the way it used to. Something had to change. And this time, I wouldn't be the only one making sacrifices. I stayed at Sapphire Lodge for a full week, not hiding, not sulking, but thinking. Really thinking. I worked during the day and wrote pages of notes at night about what I wanted as a husband, a father, a man. Every evening I FaceTimed Jackson and Luna. I checked on his cast, asked about school, listened to Luna talk about her drawings. I kept the connection alive, but I didn't go back. Not yet. Distance was the boundary I should have drawn years ago. On the third day, Sienna showed up at the hotel. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She said the house felt unbearable without me. She said the kids missed me. She said she missed me. But even then, her words circled around how she felt, not once around what I had been carrying. So I told her I wasn't ready. That we'd talk, but not on her timeline. For once, she didn't fight me on it. Maybe she sensed something had finally shifted. Unexpectedly, my parents arrived the next afternoon carrying homemade food and that same old line: "It's all just a misunderstanding." But I didn't let it slide this time. I sat them down and walked through nearly every moment of my life when I had been pushed aside for Rowan childhood games achievements, ignored promises, broken help denied. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just laid it out plainly, piece by piece. And for the first time, their faces showed recognition instead of defensiveness. My father's eyes watered. He said he never realized how much it had impacted me. My mother apologized through tears, saying she should have been at my graduation, that of all the days to show up, that was the one. Their apology didn't erase years of imbalance, but it cracked something open. It was a start. On the fifth day, Rowan came. He didn't swagger in with confidence like usual. He looked tired, weighed down. He admitted something I had never expected to hear. He kept the BBQ on my graduation day because he wanted everyone to himself. He said pressure from our parents made him cling to being the successful son. He'd feared losing that spotlight. His honesty didn't absolve him, but it explained him. Later that night, Sienna returned. She wasn't asking for forgiveness this time. She said she'd scheduled marriage counseling. She said she wanted to rebuild things the right way, not just patch them up. For the first time in a long time, her words felt intentional. I sat her down and told her what I needed going forward: clarity, respect for my achievements, shared decision-making with the kids, boundaries with extended family, and recognition that our household came first. She agreed to everything, not reluctantly, not defensively, but genuinely. A day later, I visited Jackson. He sat on the couch with his cast covered in signatures, looking smaller than usual. He leaned into me and whispered, "Dad, I want to be like you when I grow up. But I don't want to feel alone like you did that day." Those words broke something inside me, but they also rebuilt something. If my own son could understand the pain I carried, then maybe I could teach my family to understand it too. I returned home at the end of the week. It wasn't triumph or surrender. It was intentional. Sienna and I began therapy. The kids learned why that day mattered. My parents promised to show up more, to share attention instead of dividing it. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt something more honest than what we had before. About a month later, Rowan surprised me with a small celebration, just close friends, co-workers, and family. A cake with my school colors. A short speech from him about my perseverance. My parents brought a framed photo of me in my graduation gown, the one they had commissioned from the university photographer, and asked if they could hang it in their living room. When I finally placed my MBA diploma on the wall of my new office at Evergreen Capital, I realized something important. My value had never depended on their recognition, but choosing to stand up for myself helped the right people step forward to stand with me. In the end, the story wasn't about being abandoned. It was about finally being seen, finally being heard, and choosing to rebuild a life where I no longer disappeared behind anyone, not even the people I loved most. In the weeks that followed, life didn't magically fix itself, but something inside me finally settled. Not because everyone suddenly understood me, And not because the past was erased, but because I stopped abandoning myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't sprinting to keep up with expectations or apologizing for wanting to be seen. I was simply standing where I was and asking the people who loved me to stand with me. And they did, slowly, imperfectly, but they did. Jackson still asks questions about the graduation, sometimes mostly wanting to understand why grown-ups make choices that hurt each other. Luna hugs me tighter than she used to, as if she's making up for the seat she didn't occupy that day. And Sienna, she doesn't rush her apologies anymore. She listens. She reflects. She shows up. Therapy hasn't been easy. Sitting in that room, hearing how both of us contributed to the distance between us, has forced me to confront parts of myself I didn't like. My tendency to shut down. My belief that hard work alone guaranteed love. The way I pushed through exhaustion until no one could reach me, not even the people closest to me. I always thought responsibility was measured in how much I carried. Now I understand it's also measured in how openly I share the weight. My parents are learning too. Sometimes my mom brings up old memories, moments she overlooked without realizing how deeply they shaped me. My dad still struggles to put emotions into words, but he tries. And the trying matters more than perfection ever could. Rowan, well, things are different with him. Not close, not distant, just honest. For the first time in our lives, he doesn't assume I'll bend around him, and I no longer shrink around him. We've become two adults standing on equal ground rather than one towering over the other while pretending we're the same height. But the truth is, none of this would have shifted if I hadn't stepped back and taken that week alone. Distance gave me clarity I didn't know I needed. Silence made room for truths I'd been too afraid to speak. And watching my son look at me with worry in his eyes made me realize the cost of staying quiet. That day at the graduation wasn't just a moment of heartbreak. It was a turning point, the kind that hurts first and heals later. A reminder that even when people let you down, you can choose not to let yourself down. A reminder that family should be built, not assumed. A reminder that boundaries aren't walls. They're blueprints for healthier relationships. Sometimes the loudest wake-up call comes from an empty chair. Sometimes it takes a broken moment to rebuild a stronger life. And sometimes the people you need most are the ones who fail you first, but then they learn, they grow, and they show up better than before. If you've ever stood alone on a day when you shouldn't have been alone, I hope you know this: you're not the only one. And you're not weak for wanting to be valued. You're human. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be celebrated. And even if no one claps for you on the day you cross your stage, whatever that stage may be, you still crossed it. You still earned it. You still matter. I'm grateful I kept going. I'm grateful something broke that day, because what came afterward finally made space for something new to grow. And if my story reached you today, if any part of it echoes something in your own life, I want to ask you for something simple. Just let me know you're here. Say listening in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. It means more than you think to know someone is out there hearing this, feeling this, understanding this. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories about family resilience, rebuilding, healing, please consider subscribing. Not because numbers matter, but because community does. Because somewhere out there, someone else is sitting in an empty row wondering if they're the only one. And maybe through stories like this, they won't have to feel alone anymore. And as I look back now, I realize something I couldn't see in the middle of the chaos. Sometimes the life you're trying to protect is the same life that's quietly breaking you. Sometimes love becomes routine, routine becomes expectation, and expectation becomes a kind of blindness. We stop noticing the people who carry everything in silence. We forget to ask how they're doing. We assume they're strong enough to live without reassurance. I used to think strength meant endurance. That if I pushed hard enough, worked long enough, sacrificed quietly enough, the people around me would understand. But understanding doesn't grow from silence. It grows from truth. Messy, uncomfortable, vulnerable truth. And that's what I'm learning to give now. I'm learning to say, I need you here. I'm learning to say that hurt me. I'm learning to believe my worth isn't measured by how much I can handle alone. Healing isn't linear. Some days the memory of that empty row still stings. Some nights I wonder if things would have been different had I spoken up sooner. But then I see my son trying to be gentler. I see my daughter watching me with new respect. I see my wife reaching for me instead of pulling away. And I see myself finally choosing not to disappear inside my own life. Maybe that's the real graduation. Not the diploma, not the applause, but the moment you step out of who you used to be and walk toward who you're meant to become. And if my journey says anything, let it say this: it's never too late to reclaim your voice. It's never too late to ask for more. It's never too late to rewrite the story you're living in. If you've made it this far with me, thank you. Your presence matters. Your listening matters. And wherever you are right now, whatever weight you're carrying, I hope you know you deserve a life that values you just as fiercely as you value everyone else.